Hello and welcome to episode number 72 of the WP Café show with me, Keith Devon, and my beautiful co-host, Mark Wilkinson. How you doing today,
Beautiful,
Mark?
thank you.
Yeah, I just thought I'd chuck that in there. My glamorous, glamorous co-host. How are you?
I am not so bad actually. Yeah, been an interesting week
Yeah,
with some interesting things going on, which is what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, a good week actually. I think
good.
the weather's been very miserable here, which has
Yeah,
been it's this time of year, isn't it? It's dark, it's wet, it's cold. It's just not very good, really, is it? But
yeah,
we're getting
yeah.
there.
It's a
Was
bit
it 21st of December that it starts to get lighter again? So
exactly. I always kind of count down to that day and then think, right, from then on it gets better. So
yeah,
yeah,
we're not far
it's all
off. Not
good.
far off.
So we haven't done one of these in a while.
No,
It's been a few weeks. Just
it has.
busy, and I think sometimes feel like I don't know. We don't have like a burning topic or something
No,
to
I
discuss.
think
But
we were
we
busy for
felt like
2 weeks, weren't
yeah,
we? And then what or was it 1 week? And then we just like we don't really have a lot to say, so let's just not bother. Like, what's the
yeah.
point in
I
chatting
don't
when
want to
you?
put I don't
Yeah,
want to put content out just for the sake of it. I want it to be half decent. So
yeah,
yeah,
yep,
absolutely. But hopefully we've got something to say today. Hopefully we've got a few things. Actually, it's been few topics that have been building up, but there's one thing in particular that's happened this week, and that's your kind of experiments maybe with full site editing, which I think would be really cool to chat about. Um,
yeah,
but
definitely. I think that'd be good. So hi Elliot, thanks for joining us. If you are joining us live, by the way, let us know in the comments. It's nice to see who's watching along. Um, so on Monday night, I was kind of at a loose end's not the right word, but I'd finished a bit on a project and I'd sent an email to the client saying I need the answers to these things before I could carry on. And that was my main piece of work. So I couldn't finish that because I had to wait for the answer to some of these questions. So I was like, well, I wonder what I can do. And I saw people in Twitter sort of talking about full site editing and working on it, and I was like, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to have a bit of a play here and a bit of an experiment and see what we can do. Because I had a bit of a loose end to tie up, so I
mhm.
started playing around with. We have a client site which has been with us for quite a while now. They've been a customer for about 6 or 7 years,
Yeah,
maybe a bit less,
long
but they've
time.
been a long time. And they've had a couple of iterations of their site. So they came to us with a website, which we maintained for a while. And then they went through a redesign process and we built them the new site about 5 years ago, I think. So it's been around a while. It's a fairly straightforward site. And I thought, why not have a go at seeing how far I can get recreating that site using, well, what do we call it? Full site editing or creating a block theme for the site, essentially.
Hmm.
So
Kind
I
of like
set
no
about,
code basically was your kind of goal, wasn't it?
yeah, as much as I kind of knew I'd probably need some code,
Mm.
but no code as much as possible was the goal, really. How
Hmm.
far can I get in trying to get this site up and looking similar? So I started off on I think it was Monday evening, and because you were off on Tuesday, weren't you? So
That's
I
right.
spent the
Yeah.
day on Tuesday. I knew you wouldn't be here, so I thought I'll just crack on with this. I've nothing else up big on my schedule. So I started off. How do I actually start creating a block theme? Put some stuff on Twitter. Lots of people suggested starting off with a theme. So like using the Ollie theme or the 2024 theme, or other people put other suggestions in there.
Yeah.
So I had a look at those, but like most themes, they are opinionated and they have a color palette and they have various things set up for them, which obviously I would then have to either override or edit or make a child theme. So I actually went away from that idea and I decided to use a plugin that's created by the core team called Create Block Theme. And essentially, it will put into your theme folder a kind of starting theme that you can start with, which is a bit of a blank canvas, but it gives you the setup, the folder structure. It gives you a theme JSON file, which is the file that sort of sets up the
Right.
rules for your theme in full site editing. And it gives you that blank canvas. So it's a good starting point. So I set up that, it downloaded that, I got those things, and then I went about activating that in the WordPress admin, and then I started to try and recreate the site. So the first thing I did was went into the header and tried to create the header. Now, it was a very simple header, logo top left, contact details top right, and then it had a full width navigation below that, which was a horizontal nav.
At this point, Mark, had you set any kind of like color variables or spacing variables or font families or anything like that?
No, and then I realized that I'd not done that. This was when trying to create the header, and I was like, oh, I don't want that font. I want my font.
Yep.
Right, I need to go and do that. How do I do the font? So the create block theme actually allows you to add fonts, which is great. So I used the create block theme to add I think there's two fonts. They were both. No, one of them was a file in the theme, that the current theme. So I was able to use that because it will download it into your theme. And the other one was a Google font. So I was able to just say it's the Google. I think it was Merriweather was the font. So it was that font. So I was able to just say install this font. And then once you've done that, they essentially get added to your theme JSON file. And then you can see them in the drop down when you're choosing a font in the block editor, essentially on the right hand side. So that was that bit done. Then I found that I need some colors in my header because the contact details were the sort of 2 brand colors. So I then set up a color palette in the theme JSON.
How were you editing theme JSON?
In my code editor.
Okay.
Yes. Now I then realized, someone said on Twitter, I could do that in the global styles option, but I don't think you can, because the global style option, as far as I understand, allows you to change the colors that have been set up, but it doesn't allow you to say, hey, I want 9 colors and these are the 9 colors I want. I don't think it does. So it kind of, the theme JSON sets up, I don't know how many I've ended up with, but let's say I've got 10 colors in my color palette. I can now use the global styles to edit those, but I don't think I can remove one and add another one in global styles. I think you've got to do that in theme JSON. So that was something that you've got to kind of do a bit of code for, really, to get it set up. And similarly, if I was to use one of these other themes, like the Oli theme or the 2024 theme, they would have a number of colors registered, and then I could change those colors, but I don't think I could add to them.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong.
So, like, as a end user or client or whatever, from our point of view, if we're trying to think about how close this is to a no-code solution, you could have changed the color palette. Say the color palette has 5 colors, you could change those 5 colors to your own colors. But if your brand color palette had 7 colors, you couldn't have added those extra 2.
I don't believe so.
As far as you know, without
way,
interacting with the theme JSON file.
Yeah.
Okay.
If there's a way, then that's great. So once I'd got my colors, my fonts, and things like that set up, I quickly started to realize my first sort of bugbear on this, which was that the theme JSON file is a bit horrible to work with. Yeah. Because it ends up this huge, big array of things, and you don't know where you are in it. So that was a bit of a source of frustration at this point in time. But that gets better as you learn more about it, and you learn how it sort of made up, if that makes sense. It's split into different sections, and you kind of...
Yeah, like styles and settings can be a bit confusing because there's like duplicate...
Yeah, because you've got blocks exist in both, and then there's like similar settings in both. It does get confusing, but once you start using it, you get to know more about what those different elements are and so forth. And also I found... I mean, this is just so simple stuff, but your code editor actually tells you where you are in the list. So if you click on an element in the list, there's a breadcrumb at the top of my code editor that tells me, oh, I'm in settings, blocks, whatever, I'm in this block. And then you can, it's much easier to work with once you start using that. A bit like when you're using the block editor and you have the list view on the left-hand side. It's the same sort of thing. You know where you are and where you're sitting. So that was something I learned and got a lot easier after a bit of frustration that I was in the wrong place and I was adding stuff in the different places. So that was good. So then I got my header added and working. I found it, and I still find it to this day, very frustrating with groups and not being able to align a group. It seems to have to be nested inside another group before I can set a line wide or a line full.
Still
Again,
don't
that
quite
might be
understand
something
that.
I'm doing wrong, but
Yeah.
it seems strange. But we got there in the end. I did struggle taking the underline off on the links. You don't appear to be able to change. Is that text decoration? Is it called in CSS? Underline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't appear to be able to set that on a piece of text. So it will take the universal declaration that you've done in theme JSON. So I had it as underlining links, and it was underlining the links in the header, but I didn't want them in the header to be underlined because the design didn't have that. As it happens, when I looked at the rest of the site, no links were underlined, so I took it off and it was fine. And then I could change the color of those things using the block editor, which was fine.
Yeah.
So that worked okay in the end.
So could you have changed that underline state for buttons in various positions or links in various positions or not? Is that what you're saying? You can't really.
I think you can, but I was struggling at that point. I think you could probably declare them at the block level. I'm not sure. Like this block has underline on links. I'm not sure. I think you can.
Okay.
But the problem with that is that in the header, there were just 2 paragraphs which list the telephone number and I could have done a list and took the bullet off or something, but I just did 2 paragraphs. If I'd set that on a paragraph, then every paragraph block on the site would have had those rules. And I want that. I only want it on this block in the header at the top. That's
So I could be wrong here, but I don't think in theme JSON yet there's a sense of nested blocks and styling blocks. You know, if we say paragraph blocks within media text blocks should look like this, links within this type of block should look like this. I don't know if there's that, and there certainly isn't, as far as I know, a sense of like controlling things like within a header area and the body area and the footer area differently, which would be kind of useful. But yeah. All right.
I mean, you can do it with CSS. Give your header a class, off you go as you normally would have. But the whole goal here was to try and avoid that, obviously. Mm-hmm. So I then added my nav menu with the navigation block, which is much improved from when I last used it, but it's still difficult to use, I found. So one of the things I clicked on, like add a new, I think I was just adding custom links at this point because I didn't have my pages set up or anything, so I couldn't, pull pages into the list. And I clicked on like plus add a custom link, and then it says, well, what's the link? But you don't get an opportunity to set the label. You have to sort of put the link in first, then it has the link in, and then you can open a panel on the right hand side to edit it, which I thought was very strange. Like, how do I put my label in? I worked out in the end, and it was there. Then this was where the first piece of code came in, because my nav menu was horizontal, and when you reduce the page down to mobile or tablet, I wanted it to snap to the mobile option very early, because obviously it's a horizontal nav, and they'll start squashing together quite quickly. And WordPress must have a rule somewhere. I think it's at 600 pixels it starts to drop down. So I did a bit of Googling and found someone had some CSS that would alter that quite easily. Again, I'm not a CSS person. It was a copy and paste job. And I put it into the global CSS. So that was the first piece of code I sort of had to put in.
So global CSS being like what
a bit like the
customizer
customizer CSS,
but it's not quite the customizer, right?
And it's not quite as good either. It doesn't format it nicely, and you can't even see the live preview, obviously. So I put it in there, tested that, and then it squashed it at the right sort. And I fiddled around with my breakpoint, so I got it to squash at the right time, basically.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then I had my header done, which was nice. Then I did my footer. That was fairly straightforward. It was just kind of panel of color with some paragraphs in it, and I think I had the social icons block in, which was good. And then at this point, I was like, my spacing was difficult. So I'd set this. Was it at that point that I downloaded one of Brian Gardner? I downloaded the Powder theme, which he's built, just to get a sense of what did his theme JSON look like. And then I saw lots of other things in there, and there was a block gap thing. So I had a quick look at what block gap was, and it seems to be the spacing between your blocks, which is what I was struggling with. I ended up like fiddling around with padding on every block, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. Surely I shouldn't be doing that. So I added block gap, which kind of helped a little bit, but then I had too much gap between some blocks and not enough gaps between other blocks. So I'm not sure whether that did help me in the end. And although like the finished site, it's not finished, but the layout's finished, ready to add the content on. I still feel like there's a lot of fiddling with spacing that needs to happen. So I think I've kind of got that wrong. Maybe that's because I'm not like a designery CSS person like you. I think someone who knew that stuff would get this better. Put it that way. I don't.
But it's also always been a challenge, to create consistent spacing rules like pre Gutenberg, pre block editor. Like it was something that I was always trying to work on and improve, like the systems we use, and they're never perfect. So
no,
yeah,
I find some blocks you want lots of space between them. If you've got two media text blocks, for example, you want some nice white space between them. So you think, oh, well, just increase the block gap. But then paragraphs have this huge gap between them, which doesn't work. So
exactly. And my spacing rules for some of the themes we built, I guess when we built our kind of hybrid themes, they were crazy. Like some of the spacing rules for exactly that reason. So media text blocks, if they're adjacent, you want it to be like this, but you can't just add a whole bunch of top margin to it, because if there's a header in front of one of them, then you want that to be a little bit closer than if it was another type of block. And so I had all these crazy rules, like adjacent sibling selectors, if it was this, if it was that, you can't replicate that in ThemeJSON, but that's where the kind of design controls that you do have in the block editor come in. And then that opens up that whole question of whether you're turning into a designer.
That was one of my takeaways, I think. And I think having built this site, I actually think you need to go down the road of not creating those rules as much and giving the user the control to change it when they want,
Yeah.
Let them add some padding if it doesn't look right. The problem with that is they become a designer. And I said this to you when I'd done this, is when I'm adding page content, I feel like a designer. I don't feel like I'm just typing content into a page, and maybe that's fine. I don't know, but I think that is a change. When our customers are going to be adding their about page, they need to think about design that instead of just putting content in.
It makes consistency very, very difficult as well.
Exactly.
So if I'm building a page and I'm adding a heading level 2, then 3 media text blocks. Oh my god, okay, so I've done this already like 30 times on the website. What were the spacing rules I used those 30 times? Okay, right, it was this, so I do it like that, and then you've got to do that for the next one and the next one and the next time you do it. And then what happens if you want to change that in the future? So there's that's
a big problem.
There's that whole side of things, whereas previously I could go and update my CSS file and change the rules and improve the rules. Now all of that spacing, all of those spacing rules are inlined, like kind of hard coded on a per block, per page basis. So,
I mean, I think there's improvements we can make with using things like patterns and locked patterns and things like that. I think I've not really gone into those, and I was thinking at the time, I've created a little video block at the bottom here, and then I think, well, I want to put that on other pages. That's a pattern, and then they just change the videos and change the text. But it doesn't solve the problem that you said. What if we want to make a change to the styling of that? You can't do it globally as easy as you could in the past. I don't think you can anyway. That's an interesting one. I'm seeing some questions in the comments, so thanks for those. I think we'll come to those at the end if you want, and then I'll finish the sort of journey and story if that's all right.
Yeah, good to see you all, and thanks for the comments.
So I had a header and footer. Again, I was at this point. I'd got past the sort of like swearing at the screen because I couldn't do X, Y, and Z, and I'd got past all that, and I was actually quite enjoying building the site at this point. I had my spacing problems and so forth, but I was feeling confident now about going to create the next bit. So the next thing I wanted to do was to create a page. So I went into, and this was all being done in the editor, in the site edit. I wasn't like putting templates in the theme at this point. My plan is to sort of export it when I've finished, and then I hope that will pull everything into our theme files. Anyway, so I created a page, which was fine. At this point, I was struggling because I didn't want my page content to stick to the header underneath the nav that I'd put. I wanted a gap, obviously. So if the client puts a page title or a paragraph to start with or whatever, they doesn't want to touch the header. However, the design of some of the pages had a nice cover image, and then that did stick to the header. So I was like, well, I can't put padding in the template because then the cover will always have a gap.
Yeah.
But I was struggling basically how to do that. So I ended up putting padding in the template or margin or whatever it is, I don't know. So it didn't touch the top basically. And then in my page, when I went to create the page and put the content, so my page template for pages just literally had, I think it was the content block. And I think I had to group it to make it work with wide width and something like that. That was something to do with use root padding or something, which I don't quite understand. But it was to stop the thing sticking to the edge of the screen when I went down to mobile.
Yeah.
Don't quite understand what that was, but it worked anyway.
Yeah.
So I'd got my content block in, and then I'd grouped it, and then I'd add some padding at the top to stop it from sticking to the top of the nav and the footer, obviously, as well. And then when I created my page and I dropped my cover block in, I couldn't, and I still really can't do it very well to this day. How do I stick that to the top of the header? So I ended up creating a block style, a bit more code. That was just in the theme functions file. It's dead easy, register block style, and then you pass it a few parameters. And then I did an inline style where it's sort of like negative top margin, I think it was, and pushed it up slightly. It doesn't really work because when you squash the screen, it tends to overlap the nav. I don't know why that happens, but so it's not perfect, but it kind of works for a while. Anyway, so I did that. That was a bit frustrating. And then started building out the sites and quite enjoyed it, creating some little groups and columns and things to lay out things. Again, I found myself setting a lot of padding and spacing rather than having it all globally done for me, which I was thinking, the client's going to have to be doing all this. That was going to be difficult. But at this point, I was enjoying it. And then I started creating a lot more different elements. I did some styling of things. I had to create a few more block styles for things. What's in my theme file? I can't remember now, but there was a few different bits. My theme functions file wasn't that big. Created a little details block styling for FAQs because they had several pages on the site where they had these expandable sections so they can show different pieces of content. So that was good. And then, that was kind of the journey. Looked at it side by side and thought, I've done a pretty good job there.
It was very impressive, actually.
It was impressive. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was.
I'm not sure if you hadn't told me which one was which. Like, at first glance, I don't think I could have picked them apart at first glance, which, apart from maybe one telltale, which was the newsletter thing, wasn't there.
Yeah, they had like a floating
page. Apart from that,
floated in there.
Yeah, like at first glance, it was impressively close and done in a fraction of the time it took to
So it took
build.
me a day and a half, probably. I mean, it's not finished. It's not perfect. There's other things we'd have to do as we add the rest of the content. I'm sure that we'd change things. I created the blog as well, the blog archive and the blog single page.
They were both good.
That was relatively straightforward with the query loop block, and as I said, the design was quite simple. It's a simple design, so it lends well to the block editor because you can just stick things in columns and adjust the column widths so they're the right widths and things like that. There's no real complicated, like gradients or background swooshes or things like that make it difficult to do. So I was pleasantly surprised and pleased with what I'd done. So what were my takeaways? Takeaways were, this is going to change how websites are built for all developers. I just thought, well, my job's pretty much redundant now because all of the expertise we used to provide is already there, really.
Yeah. And there's small amounts of coding that you had to do were junior coding.
Yeah, just simple stuff, really.
Yeah.
But then I did think, sitting there, I was thinking, well, I don't think our clients could do this.
No.
I don't know whether they want to do this as well, actually. So I do think there is a role here, but it's coming back to that middle ground of assemblers, which I think people probably understand what we mean. people who've got excellent knowledge on a suite of different solutions for things, and their expertise and value to clients is putting those things together to provide a solution.
Yeah.
But if you go outside of those, that's where they struggle. And I think that's now come into this, really, in that if you can become an expert in the block editor and fix these little, things that I struggle with, then there's a role for that. And I think because clients don't want to do it and won't have the knowledge to do it, it's just kind of changed a lot.
Well, it had already changed though, because that is the change that happened when the page builders became so good.
Yeah.
So like it was the emergence of Divi and Elementor and Beaver Builder, whatever, that created the whole assembler market, as it were. And now full site editing is just one of those other page builders, like one of those other solutions that people can potentially use. I mean, the difficulty being that it's not as full featured and powerful as those other solutions at all.
It's pretty good. I mean, for this
pretty
site,
good.
I got a long way, so and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it. It was, I said, frustrating to start with, and on a lot of sort of swearing at the screen. But once you got past those sort of barriers, it was quite enjoyable to do. Very different way of building websites than we're used to, but the end result was pretty good, which was good. Should we look at some of these questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or comments. So Elliot says the nav block is confusing. I find it should always save a menu first, otherwise navigation it is very confusing. Yeah, it has come a long way. It was the first version of the navigation block was practically unusable. This one is much better, but I do think there are some UI and tweaks that could be improved on it just to make it a bit more easy to use, which is probably something that will be looked at.
Yeah.
Tim, hi Tim. Question on being a designer. Do you feel this will make it harder for a developer to take a Figma or existing HTML template and implementing it in full site editing? I think that's hard for me to answer, but I struggled to get like a pixel perfect copy of this, but I don't understand CSS very well. I'm sure if you did this, Keith, you have to write some code, I think.
I think there's a bit of a 80-20 thing going on here. I think it's easier to get, it's probably much faster to do that first 80% using the block editor and full site editing, but it'll be very, very hard to do that last 20%. If that design is quite custom and pushes the boundaries a bit, there's just stuff.
Yeah,
there's so much that you can do with a website that you cannot do code free within the kind of full site editing experience. And so much that you can do in Elementor, etc. That you can do in those tools today that you definitely can't do with full site editing. So there's I think what that proved is, I mean, you proved that you came a long way very, very quickly. But those final steps were going to get progressively harder to make those pixel perfect designs, and that was quite an easy design to replicate. So yeah,
it wasn't a tough one. I think it would be a lot harder with a more complicated design. Elliot says, personally, I feel it becomes easier once you are familiar with how to navigate style setting for each block. They can apply to different settings also. You need to be fairly familiar with theme.json. Yeah, I found that. Like once I'd got going, once I'd kind of familiarized myself with where the settings in theme.json were. And not only that, like using the block editor more, you kind of know where to go, where to set, and then the little quirks. I do think some of the UI stuff and design of the block stuff is quite hard to understand if you're not in our space.
Yeah, especially with the group block and, like whether it's a row or a column or, I can't remember what the terminology is, like stacked. Like I didn't even understand what it meant. It's essentially taking Flexbox and trying to make a user-friendly UI. So because I understand Flexbox and CSS, I kind of get it. But you were like, what the hell does this mean? Like, what are all these different alignments?
A group and a row and a stack. And I don't really understand the difference between them. Yeah. But obviously, someone said on Twitter, like, oh, well, the row is just a Flexbox container, and something is like, well, that doesn't mean anything to me. And it won't mean anything to customers, to clients who be using this. And then you get that toggle when you've added a group, and it's like, do you want the inner blocks to take something? And it's like, I don't understand what that does either, really. But so you just toggle it on and toggle it off until it looks like it should do. That was my solution, and it kind of worked. Quickly go through some of the comments. Developers still need to add functionality, Ajax, custom query, custom dashboards. I don't think WPSs are redundant. No, I don't think they are redundant, but I do think there's less to do.
I think exactly. I think we need to be really realistic and say that every time WordPress gets better, there is a market. There's a percentage of the work that we used to be able to charge for that we can no longer charge for, which essentially shrinks the market for WordPress developers. So as WordPress gets better and better and better and more and more and more capable, unless the WordPress's market share is getting bigger, the developer market is getting smaller. And I think that's just an absolutely natural evolution of a bit of software. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It just is the way it is for me. But I think Elliot's absolutely right. There's still lots and lots that needs developers, lots of custom functionality and pushing the boundaries in this way and that way. And I'm not saying that it's dead and there's nothing for us to do. There is, but there's just less. There's less for us to do, I would argue.
Yeah. Any others you want to go through on there?
I think we should. Let's jump in. Munch92. It seems as tech software gets better, the client's needs and expectations become greater, ironically surpassing full site editing. Yeah, okay. For example, RecPress, HTML, CSS templates, thing of the past. HTML, CSS template. I'm not entirely sure what the question is or what that's maybe saying. I do think, expectations will be higher and higher. Absolutely, because people are looking at the capabilities of other content management systems, Squarespace, Wix, etc., and expect to be able to do all the same stuff in WordPress. They're looking at the capabilities of the page builders within WordPress, and they expect full site editing to be able to do those things. Everything is becoming a bit more polished and slick, and I think that's true. I think if we're delivering client websites today, we couldn't deliver what we delivered 7 years ago and expect clients to be happy with it. They'd be like, why can't I do this? Why can't I add this content? Why can't I change this page layout? So absolutely. The bar has been raised. Definitely.
Yep.
Any others you want to go through there, Mark?
Nick says, the big question for me is making it maintainable and scalable. For example, if you need to update a block pattern used on 50 pages, how do we handle that using core features? That is exactly my question.
That is the big question for us.
And that's going to be a problem, I think, unless solutions are found. But we'll see.
Yeah.
And then Nick also says, regarding the market, I agree. All hinges on the value you add to your client and their project. If it's predominantly code, then that bar has shifted. Yeah, it's changing. The market's changing. What we can do is changing, definitely.
Yeah. I just want to bring in a comment here from TikTok Studio. I think this is a first-time commenter. So thank you for leaving that comment. One of my fave I like about Shopify Customizer, so Shopify, okay, is that clients can be limited in their actions whilst being able to visually customize their site. Can we lock it down in FSE, or is it completely open? You can definitely lock stuff down. In quite a significant way, actually. Nearly any panel or option you can turn off. There's guides out there on that kind of thing. I don't know who's done the best ones. I know that Frank Klein did one. I'm sure there's probably something on fullsiteediting.com, but Googling around for locking down the block editor, and I'm sure you'll find something. But it's very lockdownable.
Yeah, I remember a post from Nick Diego. It might have been on the developer.wordpress.org/news, I think.
Yeah.
All about locking stuff down. I think there's probably more to go there, and more to do in terms of helping you lock down stuff. And also ThemeJSON helps you lock down stuff. You can turn things off in ThemeJSON. I can't think of an example.
Well, just any of those layout controls,
Yeah.
like the spacing controls, like margin and padding and
Correct.
stuff, you can
turn
all that
those
off.
off and say you can't change the margin and padding. And I believe you can also say for paragraphs, yes, but for images, no, I don't want any of those paddings and controls on there and things like that. It is quite granular, which is good.
It is.
So have a look at that. And the other thing I must say, I don't know whether this is related to Tim's question. I'm going to read it now. I haven't read it yet. What resources did you use to learn while building your theme? You mentioned someone else's theme. So resources is a good point. So to answer the question, I was engaged on Twitter with a lot of people who were helping me, which was good. Really nice to see and really helpful. I used the theme handbook. I think it's the block theme handbook on whatever it is. Is it on make.wordpress.org? I don't know. Google it. It comes up. It came up with the first one. And I have to say, that is much, much improved since I've last used it. It's very detailed and pretty impressive, actually. So that's a really good starting point. I was working through I should find the link and we can put it in the description, but I was working through the theme JSON handbook bit, basically, that talks about the theme JSON, and I was working through all the different pieces of it and understanding how it works. And then to answer your question, you mentioned someone else's theme. It was the Powder theme from Brian Gardner, which is available it's actually on .org, on the themes repository. I downloaded that, and that was really just to sort of see what was in the theme JSON of his theme. I particularly got stuck with this use root padding thing, and that helped me fix that. I know he had it set to true, and then had some other padding rules just near it, and I was like, oh, I wonder what they do, and I copied those into mine, and then they did the change. It was a bit of old school WordPress, copy and paste, save, reload, and see what happens, which is quite nice. So those are the resources that I use, which was good.
I just want to give a little quick shout out to Elliot, who says he's creating a video for YouTube on creating a block theme ready for full site editing, both manually and with a plugin. So Elliot's been putting out quite a lot of good content recently, so definitely check out his stuff. On that, there's a few other kind of resources. We've gone for a long episode this week, but just a couple of things before we go that I think are kind of timely and relevant. There is a roadmap to WordPress 6.5 on the Make blog. I will attempt to put the link in here as a banner. Let me just do that. Add banner, go. You probably won't be able to kind of copy that URL. Just Google it or go
put it in
to
the description at the end.
Yeah, make.wordpress.org, and you can have a look at that. Some kind of interesting stuff in there. The big one for me that people I think have been waiting for is a font library, so a way to kind of manage custom fonts. But there's other interesting stuff there around custom fields. Is one as well, which kind of piqued my interest. There's stuff around the interactivity API, which I still don't fully understand, but
no, I don't
always good to keep an eye on what's coming down the road. Just also on kind of like resources and interesting things to watch. There have been 2 really good interviews recently by a chap called Spencer Foreman, who I hadn't come across before, weirdly. His YouTube channel is WP Launchify, all one word. And he came to my attention because he interviewed Matt Mullenweg 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was a really good, frank interview. It's the interview that I wish I'd done with Matt when I had that chance. Spencer kind of doesn't pull any punches, gives Matt all the respect Matt deserves, but doesn't give him so much respect that he doesn't ask the questions that need to be asked. Really, really good. I thought it was worth a watch. And then as a follow-up to that, he's also been quite critical of Syed Balki, the kind of head of Awesome Motive, around kind of their dodgy practices in the WordPress space. And he then, Syed has agreed to have a call, a chat with Spencer. I think they did the same thing with Matt. He has a private call first. They kind of get stuff out, and then they said, right, let's do that again in public. So I've watched about, I don't know, the first 20 minutes of them with Syed, and again, Spencer's great. Like, he lets Syed say his things, And he's like, actually, I don't, fully agree with you on that. I'm going to pull you up on this and that and the other thing. And he puts the hard questions to them. He's really, really good. Great interviews. So I would definitely check those out if you're interested in kind of the general leadership in the WordPress space. I think that's it for this week. Have you got anything else to say?
No, we'll find those links and we'll add them to the show notes. I've just written a few things down that we mentioned there. We can put them in the description of the video, so you can click on those if you're listening as a podcast rather than watching along with the captions and things.
Yeah.
No, nothing else from me. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Nice to be back and having a bit of a chat about WordPress. As always, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and all that. It really helps us out. And we will see you. I'm not going to say next week. I'm going to say in the next episode. It should be next week, but you never know.
Yeah.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.